Wizordum is an old-school first-person shooter with dungeon crawler sensibilities. Developed by Emberheart and published by Apogee, this fantasy throwback takes a page from classics like Catacombs 3D, Wolfenstein 3D, and Heretic, with graphics and gameplay oozing pure nostalgia. Wizordum was recently released into early access, and the wizards at Apogee were kind enough to send me a key. A big thank you to them. So today I'll be lending my thoughts on this initial build, and whether or not it's worth your hard-earned mana. So let's warm up our hands and pop some potions as we descend into the dungeons of Wizordum. Included in this early access build is the first of 3 planned episodes, featuring 8 levels, one of them revolving around a boss fight. There are online leaderboards to brag about your scores, as well as a level editor that I'll touch on later. The current price is $14.99 American, which is expected to raise as more content is added. The developer is planning to leave early access in 2024, although there are no specific dates and currently no update roadmap. While Wizordum looks bright and shiny, its story setup is anything but. The game takes place in the once peaceful fantasy land of Terra Bruma, that came under siege from the forces of chaos after an ancient seal was shattered. With its towns pillaged and residents slaughtered, the magic wielders of Wizordum Sanctuary step up to stop the bloodshed, dispatching its finest spellcasters, all of which would never be heard from again. You play as the remaining member of the Wizordum Guardians, the last hope in saving the land from the vile menace that plagues it. Stepping into the town of Grimbrook with only a mace in your hand, you begin your journey into the heart of chaos. Wizordom's visuals are convincingly retro. Levels are made up of blocky geometry and populated with 2D sprite baddies. The sprite work is excellent. It's clean, dimensional, and emulates that chunky 90s style well, squeezing in a fair amount of detail. Notice the spots of blood on your mace and the chips and bits of moss along these brownstone walls. The warm lighting certainly leans more modern. You may even notice the occasional beam of light made from a transparent 3D model. But if you look closely, many of the light sources are rendered to appear like blocky sprites, keeping with the visual theme. The art direction is classic sword and sorcery fantasy that is bright and uplifting, with magnificent blue skies, vivid green grass, and cartoonish enemy designs. However, it does mix things up with dark spooky areas full of zombies and murky sewers flooded with polluted water, ooze, and hanging moss. Like I said, it's classic fantasy. There's not much here you haven't seen in other games, but it's all superbly rendered and nails the old school vibe it's aiming for. If I was reaching for a nitpick, the peppier feel of the visuals does feel at odds with the darker themes of the game. I mean, you are in a town called Grimbrook that was decimated by bloodthirsty monsters, with dead bodies and blood splatter everywhere. But then again, you could argue this reinforces that the town was a peaceful place before chaos descended upon it. Overall though, Wizordom's graphics are charming and effectively hooked me into the experience. The music is a huge standout. Each level is flavored with an epic symphonic suite that reminded me of composers like Michael Giacchino. In fact, the level 4 theme, Morning Grounds, sounded an awful lot like one of Giacchino's tracks from the original Medal of Honor. You don't often hear music this grand composed for games such as this, and it was an absolute treat. If I had one issue, the game's sound effects are a little inconsistent. Some of them go for a crunchy, low-res sound, which does fit the retro style, while others are more clear and high quality, mostly for the enemies. And for me, it all sort of clashed and was distracting, especially with the rich, high-quality music. To be clear, I don't think these effects are bad, I just want some consistency in their quality. Either make them all old school crunchy, high quality clear, or have both and give me the choice. On the technical side, Wizordum ran like butter. As it should. There's very little here that would give a graphics card a wallop. And the only bug I encountered was this one where dead bats would be frozen in place, which is more funny than anything. Much like the graphics, the gameplay is all about the nostalgia, a throwback to early 90s FPS action, with a sprinkling of modern touches to keep the action brisk. You start off with a simple melee weapon, your mace, which isn't great. There's no way to block or parry enemies, so while attacking, you have to keep moving back and forth as to not get your health clobbered, which is awkward feeling. But this is a short-lived problem, as you'll soon get your hands on a fireball spell, a rapid-fire ice staff, and the shotgun-like spell striker. And these three will be your main damage dealers for the rest of the game, and effective ones at that. A nice thing though is that the mace is mapped to its own key for a quick melee hit, which is fantastic for, say, freezing enemies with the ice staff and smashing them. It should also be noted that the grenade-like magic orbs are also mapped to their own key for a quick toss-out. Very nice. You also have a decent arsenal of limited consumable power-ups, an invisibility cloak for sneakiness, a wide-reaching fire spell, and force push, to name a few. And if those weren't enough, a charged-up special ability that is the boom shoot equivalent of Talk to the Hand, able to one-shot a majority of the enemies. For the most part, it's straightforward, old-school FPS combat, and it's quite fun, with some challenging enemies like skeletons that can reform themselves after being killed, and wizards with homing spell attacks. That cracked me up a little when they died, as they do this funny moan and dab in their death animations. I do have a few notes. I think the splash damage for the magic orbs and rocket launcher-esque pyroblast is too wide, making it too easy to accidentally damage yourself. You really have to give yourself some ample space with these weapons, and often it made me second guess using the quick toss for the magic orb. And for future updates, it'd be cool to see more emphasis on weapon combos and exploiting weaknesses, along the lines of freezing enemies and then shattering them with the mace. Like, what if an enemy could be lit on fire with the fireball, or the mace was needed to break through armor or a shield before you could do any damage, or an enemy that can only be killed with the magic orb. Things along this line to make combat feel more dynamic and have players thinking more. While this first build of Wizordum only features 8 levels, they are big. Real big. On a first playthrough, some of these maps took me close to an hour to get through, sometimes over that. A lot of that was from simply getting through the sprawling, non-linear, maze-like layouts that are basically giant puzzles. While it's easy for this style of level design to get frustrating, I think the developers pulled it off. Each map feels like its own epic adventure, with you traveling between areas, ransacking houses and castles, and dipping in and out of dungeons and crypts, dodging traps and solving brain teasers. There's usually something different around every corner. Mitigating confusion, you do have a map to help you through, and the game does point you towards the critical path. But there are a lot of optional areas and secrets to discover off the beaten path, so you won't necessarily feel like you're having your hand held. That being said, there were times where I did get lost and confused, which was irksome, but I was always able to figure it out with a little bit of observation. Hexen, this game is not. And while my completion times were hefty in my first attempts, replaying these levels I found my times were often cut in half, if not more. And each level has challenges for speedrunning, killing all the monsters, and finding all the secrets and loot, which is great for replayability and for those completionists out there. A real nifty feature is that Wizordum comes with an in-game level editor, which has been a growing trend within the retro shooter community. Personally, this sort of thing doesn't really interest me, but I did play around with it and was surprised to see how approachable and powerful it was, sporting a nice clean interface. As far as I can tell, this is a well put together tool, but truthfully, I'm not really the best judge of this sort of thing. So if there's any Wizordum map editors watching, please let me know what you think of this editor down in the comments. I do know the devs are planning on adding more functionality in future updates, like being able to add custom textures and custom story screens, which is pretty cool. Naturally, since there is a map editor, there's a way to share levels, and Wizordum lets you easily access and install community maps, and wouldn't you know, there's already some levels posted. Some of them are standouts, like a recreation of Wolfenstein's E1M1, and some of them, not so much. But there's a lot of potential here for a thriving mapping community, and it will be fun to see what comes of this. Wizordum is really solid, and this is a strong start to its early access. Its gameplay is fun, its presentation charming and polished, and this first build has a good amount of content packed into it. While I don't think it's going to be every shooter fan's tankard of mead, I think those who appreciate the oldest of old school FPS styles will get a lot out of this. Caution with early access is always wise, but I do think this is a safe purchase. Otherwise, definitely wishlist and maybe check out the demo. It's a good time. What are your thoughts on Wizordum? Be sure to let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, subscribe, share, and smack that bell. If you want to come say hi, my Discord is linked below, along with my affiliate links. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.